The era of AI is now. AI has the potential to add $957 billion or 15% of India's current gross value in 2035. Now, the combination of technology, data, and talent that makes intelligent systems possible has reached a critical mass, and that's driving extraordinary growth in AI investment. AI can boost growth, profitability, and transform businesses. According to an Accenture study, in the manufacturing sector, one could witness a share of profit increase of 39% owing to AI-powered systems, where the ability to learn, adapt, and evolve with time can help in removing faulty machines and idle equipment. India is an acknowledged global powerhouse of advanced technology talent and now has an opportunity to leapfrog as a hub for AI and data skills by building a multi-dimensional talent base. In our discussion today, we will explore all these themes and understand the strategies that work. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan, and joining me are a diverse group of leaders with deep links to the world of AI. So let me quickly introduce them to you, starting with Dr. Rimjhim Agarwal, co-founder and CTO at Brainsight; Lorenzo Bavasso, Data and AI Director at BT Global; Senthil Ramani, Head of Applied Intelligence at Accenture for its growth markets; Dr. Pushpak Bhattacharya, Professor for the Computer Science and Engineering Department at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay; and Sanjay Gurbaksani, Global Digital Innovation Lead and Regional CIO and Shared Services Leader, AP, Middle East and Africa at Mondelez International. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of this discussion. It is a very relevant theme, so let's understand it from broad contours and then focus on specific issues. So let's begin with a question which is open to all panelists from their vantage point as a global business leader, startup founder, academician or thought leader, on how the conversations around AI adoption are evolving at enterprises. Sanjay, we'll come to you first for this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. AI is here. It's not something of the future. It's not something that will come tomorrow. It's here now. It's part of many conversations today within our organization, and whether it's like you shared, right, whether it's driving top line revenue growth for us, we are, and I know we'll get into the conversations around use cases, whether it's also driving operational efficiencies. So it is enabling top and bottom line growth at our organization. And from a talent perspective, since you touched on it, absolutely, it is a core skill that we are looking for in our talent, in our early career recruits, as we call them, or digital native talents, as we are onboarding them into organization. This is a skill we are clearly looking for, and also offering this as a development opportunity for people that are already in the organization, including folks like myself.
All right, that's the global leader perspective. Let's see what the startup arena thinks about it. Dr. Agarwal, your perspective on the conversations which are happening around AI adoption, which are evolving at enterprises.
Yeah, so actually what we see right now is year by year, there is almost like double the deployment of AI that is in previous year. So we are seeing an exponential growth in deployment of AI projects. In healthcare itself, it is around 44.5 CAGR level. Till 2026, it is expected. So I think it is amazing how increasingly people are deploying AI projects and solutions. And it is at two levels, one at automating and another one at finding out new things, finding out new patterns, finding out new areas where AI can explore so much more. So that is really amazing how we see the trend right now.
Absolutely.
And startups are all picking up on these new ideas.
Absolutely. 44.5% CAGR. I mean, when it comes to AI, just looking at the numbers makes you think about the possibilities. Senthil, as an enabler, when you hear these numbers, you do see that, the drive of AI is picking up steam in this fourth industrial revolution. But dialing back to the question around conversations around AI adoption, what do you think is happening at enterprises?
Absolutely dramatic, Gautam, and never been a better time to be in AI and a professional in AI. For all of us, I would say. Since we are talking about AI, we should start with data, because data is the fuel for AI. And I have a couple of data points for you. Right, when we did a a fairly massive study, of 1,500 CEO and chief executives around the world. What we found was quite a few interesting telling statistics. Number one was that the exemplars, as we call them, the leaders, were doing 3x better on their financial metrics across all their financial metrics. Number two that we saw was 76% of them were saying that if they did not adopt AI in the next 3-5 years, they'll be out of business. So effectively, the scale of AI is really arriving at organizations. In fact, I want to give you a post-pandemic statistic of the exact same study we did. Post-pandemic study says that investment has gone up, and now it's a 5x return on financial metrics, for some of the exemplars. The second data point I wanted to give you was I just ran an annual, a bunch of annual reports right now that we saw, and all my colleagues will agree that NLP is much usable today than it was 2-3 years back. So I ran NLP. My team and I did that. 81 reports. We looked at C-suite executives, what they're talking about. Interestingly speaking, right? I've never heard this happen. They talk about words like commerce AI, conversational AI, and social AI, and that caught my attention, right? Of CEOs talking about it. So AI is now a boardroom topic. Organizations want to be data driven, and that's exactly what is happening now.
Absolutely. Considering 5x returns, I would be surprised if it's not a boardroom topic. But a fair point. I mean, the numbers are there for everyone to see in terms of potential. So let me hear from Lorenzo as to what he thinks the conversations are around AI adoption, which are evolving at enterprises.
But it's a pivotal moment for AI, I think, because it's the moment in which we are moving from a lot of companies, apart from the high performers and the techco, to start piloting and start to, get their head around it, to really them wanting to invest and scale on it. So it's a moment for high growth. I think now the trick is there are many levels in which AI is evolving in enterprise. One is coming. Every service or partner you deal with is proposing some AI out of the box. So there is already this frenzy of buying something out of the box and consuming it at high scale rather than build something that can cost investment. But still, the build aspect is very important because is where you build your connected intelligence, is where you differentiate from the rest. So I think there is this moment in enterprises where there is a high level of discussion, a different level of the company about we buy this, we build that, we build a brain, we connect it to the rest of the organization. It's everywhere. But it's not a commodity yet. So that's I think the point that differentiate AI from the rest of the technology transformation that companies are going through.
Absolutely. And that's one of the themes which we'll be exploring in the discussion, which is important because, it's either a build, operate, transfer model or a build, operate model. So we'll see what works in what context. But coming to you, Dr. Bhattacharya, from an prominent academician's perspective, what's your thought on the conversations which are happening around AI adoption, which are evolving at enterprises?
What used to be an object of romance has become a reality now. And the engine for this change has been data. The importance of data was mentioned. But we would all recall that AI was born with the father of computer science, Alan Turing, who created the computing machinery.
So as we look at its use, you're saying that earlier the context was different. It's speeding up computation. But now the variety in terms of its use cases means that the very definition of AI could be evolving.
Right. And it is the data which is making all the difference. Data with probability and machine learning that is making all the difference.
Absolutely. As one of the panelists said, data is the new oil. But it's also about harnessing this data, which brings me to the question on talent. And Dr. Bhattacharya, your view on this is important because the president of NASSCOM sees India becoming the world's digital talent hub, projecting that the demand for talent in AI, robotics, and data science will be 20 times greater than supply by 2025. So I'd like to know from you, what does India need to do to become an AI talent hub for the world?
So, yeah, indeed, we in academics, we are in the business of education, training, fertile minds for creating ideas, working on them, implementing them, and seeing their realization. Now, what is required for AI education? Maybe your question really touches on this fundamental point. So everybody talks about, mathematics, physics, science subjects being important. But what is also emerging is that humanities and social sciences also have to be given a lot of importance.
Mhm.
So these kind of skills, foundations need to be built
Mhm.
for students, and the merrier, the more the better. And there is an
Absolutely.
acute need for creating such talent base, and academicians have a big duty to perform.
Absolutely. And that's a very important point where we need to focus the education part of AI into more practical applications rather than just theoretical. A good point that you mentioned there. Sanjay, let me come to you. You have extensive regional and global mandates. You bring in new and emerging technologies to disrupt the way Mondelez thinks and does business. So in that context, the low code, no code approach to software development by building a robust citizen developer community is an interesting case study. And, since we spoke of the economic potential of AI in India trying to become a talent hub, what lessons can Mondelez share from a global perspective on tapping AI for economic growth and building a talent hub to support it? Because as Lorenzo mentioned, the conversation is there around, whether it's it's pre-built or whether you build it on its own. So the conversation is in the C-suite. What can you share from the Mondelez point of view?
Yeah, so I'll touch on a couple of things buried in there. So on low code, no code, I think that's absolutely the future. I think there's a study out there that says 75% of all applications by 2025 will be on low code, no code, which is, a very powerful metric, right? And so we, within Mondelez ourselves have taken on this challenge and said, how can we migrate to that platform even much sooner? So we've set an aggressive target internally and are well on the way to get there. And this is really going to be enabled by creating internal set of users who are at the edges of the business, who have no technology background but are technology savvy, let's say. So how do you build this community that can really take these capabilities like no code, low code, no code, and scale this across the enterprise? And if I then take it and plug in AI there, I think in the world that we live in now, this new normal that we've come to, right, where everything is virtual, our organization is absolutely, and I mean, it's across everywhere, right? And you kind of reference some of the metrics. We're using AI, across the enterprise in many, many areas. I think some of the lessons, it has to be top-down sponsored. I think you need your CEO or your president of the company, your business unit, your region, whatever, to absolutely understand this capability, to be a huge sponsor of it. Because as even Senthil touched, 5x return on investment. So you need this top-down sponsorship. You need the top-down understanding of what this capability is. So those are things that we are learning fast. We are trying to get to this culture where we can bring some of these agile practices in, and that's what we are trying to do here, at least within Mondelez.
Lorenzo, coming to you, you have significant experience in big business and technology transformations. Today, as we navigate this pandemic, how is BT Global enabling clients to reimagine value creation from an AI standpoint? Is the effect of this AI-powered digital transformation going to be an evolution from, say, platform economy to platform business models? Because we're seeing that happen in India, where a lot of the business models are going towards the aggregation point of view, but they're also trying to build value within their own business, even from that aggregated standpoint. So from that perspective, what can the world learn from India?
But I have to say, so for us as a business, of course, it's important we want to do a step change in the way in which we serve and interact with our customers. So we want to move from, we are providing you a service, you give us something back in the form of revenue, into becoming a trusted partner. So to become a trusted partner, you need to start to have a way more dynamic and intelligent interaction with what you define a customer, and also with your providers. And I think that's where the platform business concepts start to take shape now, because you move from a very transactional, monodirectional value chain to connecting into an ecosystem. Your providers, your customers, everyone becomes a partner. And as a partner, as you have this bi-directional relation, you do something, you get something else, and the platform becomes a very data-rich place. Yeah. So the AI and data exploitation in that platform is what makes you super effective and intelligent in dealing both with your customer and with your partners, and also can unblock other opportunities. You don't just provide a service and share with your customer telemetry about your service. As an example, you can give them insight that help them to be a better business because you see patterns, and you can also evolve the platform quite effectively doing so. So I think this is what is the point? Then you can become more transparent, so they can consume their services knowing what they're paying for. The partners can get feedback loops from the ecosystem and the platform and become better and more adaptable. No? So you move from that long-lasting, stable revenue model into a bit more dynamic one, but that is a lot healthier because it's based on good sharing of information and exploitation of data. Now, the platform economy is a similar concept where you bring, for example, labor market closer to the customers and to what they need, or to employer and what they need on gig economy, task-based work. And also it's a bit of a cultural shift there because you need to move from stable income and a bit of a more rigid work framework into a more flexible one. The two things have to complement each other a bit, but India is teaching us that actually, especially when you come out from an event that is like the pandemic, it's a fantastic way to get growing and to restart, right? Mm-hmm. I think the point of attention there is that you have to be able to still make sure that there is a degree of regulation and framework, right? Otherwise, it becomes an arena, but also make sure that you help. In the case of an economy, the citizen. In the case of a business, customer and partners, to do the little cultural shift, which is not little actually, it's a bit more than little. But once you have done these two things, I think that you can really drive growth in a massive way. And we see more and more companies going toward this model, and there are businesses that are becoming networks of platforms, right?
All right, that's a great overview in terms of how the business model itself is evolving, and as new aspects come about when we speak about, say, the platform business model. It's also important for the talent to understand how the broader industry is shaping up so that they can focus their efforts into what they like. Coming to you, Senthil, you have a keen interest in music. So I'm going to use an analogy of an orchestra where if all the moving parts work, there's beautiful music, but if there's no effective coordination, considering the scale, you get the opposite. And I mentioned that analogy in the context of scaling up AI. Lorenzo was talking about how the model itself is changing, and usually the issue comes up when it comes to scaling. And many agree that AI will power their growth. And that's something you mentioned as well, but they just don't know how to scale AI across businesses. So I guess I want to ask you, how can firms transform from being a jazz quartet to the Vienna Philharmonic, and how can Accenture help firms in that regard?
Got it. So that's going to be the next 6 hours of this conversation.
If you could compress it.
I know, exactly. This is a mini symphony here. Let me just probably start off, take a step back, right? I mean, and I'll give the illustration of this in the context of Accenture. We call ourselves AI too, but we call ourselves applied intelligence. And the purpose is very simple for us, right? It is to enable private and public institutions to make better decisions, faster decisions, and with more confidence, right? And why did we call ourselves applied intelligence? Again, is because the mission is accomplished only when you derive insights which lead to intelligence and you're able to apply it. So which is why we call it applied intelligence. Our focus is truly on scale, going back to scaled AI, and we want to build as many as possible production-ready models which can enable this intelligence to happen at the edge or wherever you are in the organization. And the way we do this is probably 3 different vectors, Gautam, that we bring together. Number one is, and I'll start with our core and our foundation and our pillar, which is talent, right? We focus on talent, and in addition to, machine learning talent, which is fundamental to what our colleagues, talked about, where we are deeply committed to upskilling the talent, because, it's a lifelong learning when you get into the AI journey, right? The important other aspect is industry nuance. We saw what Sanjay was saying and Lorenzo was saying. If the industry nuance is not understood, we won't be able to build and apply the models properly. So that's a very, very important aspect for us, number one. Number two, if you actually look at the assets and methods, to a large extent, We've built what is called solutions.ai. Please check it out. It's very cool. And what we've enabled over time to build is an 80-20 rule, where you can have a high degree of automation we take to a lot of the use cases that we talked about earlier. We've applied over 2,000 patents, by the way, in doing so. And that enables, most of our clients, again, societal and organizations, to go 2-3x times faster, right, in the entire life cycle, if you will. There's one important aspect I wanted to talk about, which is just not models, right? It's about data and culture. And the training that we impart on data and culture is really important. And I have a saying, after having gone through so many digital transformations, that data always is a sprint ahead of your AI engagement, and culture is 2 sprints ahead of your AI engagement. And that is very, very important, because you won't be able to apply the intelligence if we don't do that. The last vector was organic growth. We bought over 8 organizations, large organizations for different skills, niche capabilities into Accenture, and we will continue doing that. But it's really important to scale through that. That is going to be very, very key as well, Gautam.
All right, that's from the prism of, as you said, talent, solutions, the culture, as you mentioned, and the organic growth. It almost seems like a relay race where everyone has to be in sync to make sure that you win the race. Let's focus on an India-specific case study. We've kind of understood the broad contours. Let's see how it's being applied. AI applications have been especially promising in the healthcare space, when with better diagnostics, with data intelligence, and improving patient experiences with AI-powered solutions. So let me come to Dr. Agarwal for this. Dr. Agarwal, take us through your journey of building an industry standard product, AI product like VoxelBox. Do you see AI as the key for bridging the digital divide in India, especially when it comes to healthcare?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I would say that AI in India is still in the path of getting that trust and validation when it comes to healthcare. Because even if right now AI, if we would say, is working at the level of humans in making some of the decisions, they will be required to generate a lot of evidences around that. And the best way is to do it by doing multiple comparison pilots with hospitals and clinics and the doctors who are working with all around India. So that is one way how the validation can happen. So when coming to any product like VoxelBox, this is the given way of moving towards. There is one validation at customer level, another validation at the AI validation, and the next level is at the accuracy, at the clinical accuracy. And coming to your point of how it is paving the path in India specific case, there is a huge gap of the requirement that we need from medical healthcare professionals. The number of professionals are way lesser than what our population requires. So that is a huge gap that AI can fulfill. For old doctors, AI can be assistant, and it can provide good outputs and evidences for them to take decisions. However, when it comes to new doctor, I think anyways, they will be going to be much tech savvy, and it will get integrated in their day-to-day practices.
Absolutely. In the talent context, we'll expand on it more in the conversation. But as you mentioned, the validation issues, right? Whether it comes to customer validation, AI validation, and other validations, how did you overcome those challenges?
So for overcoming that, we have divided our projects itself into 3 phases. The first one is at the time of building the algorithm, the evidences that we get. So when you must be knowing that there is AI where we are training with the labels. So we get the labels from doctors who are collaborating with us. So at that level itself, we are publishing papers that says that we have achieved X number of accuracy while conducting any prediction or making any prediction. So that is one level. Another is to conduct a pilot above that, where in the real world scenario, how the AI algorithm is performing in hospital. Then the third level is at the commercialization level, like how much, if it is performing at certain level, how much is customer going to pay for that? So this is the 3 level steps that we are performing.
All right, that's the ringside view for all the AI talent watching this discussion as to how to overcome challenges when you're building an exciting startup. But taking a point about going up in value, and I'll come to Sanjay for this. Is AI going to be India's ticket? You think for going up the value chain? As we mentioned, just considering the manufacturing aspect within the FMCG sector, we are seeing more intangible benefits of AI, including increasing levels of personal and material safety, operational accuracy, real-time visibility for better planning, and increased levels of job satisfaction, among others, coming into focus, along with the tangible benefits such as the projected share of profit increase of 39%, which I mentioned earlier, which is due to AI powered systems, where the ability to learn, adapt, and evolve over time can eliminate faulty machines and idle equipment.
No, absolutely. I think it's going to be anyone's ticket to go up the value chain. Not only India, I think anyone personally, professionally. I mean, this is like we've been saying, right? This is here for the long term. I think there's also a study out there that the data that we will collect in the next 3 years is going to be more than what data we've collected in up till now since the beginning. So, I mean, that just tells you data growth is exponential. 5G is coming, right? And these are all the right pieces we need in place to really let AI grow exponentially in India and across the globe, of course, over the next few years. So I think it's absolutely going to support. I think the visions that have been put out, right, whether it's smart factories, whether it's smart cities, some of the things you talked about, operational efficiencies, these are all going to be enabled by the data that we're collecting and by the power of AI. And even if I just touch on one use case, right, with COVID being so rampant in the country, whether it was wave 1 and then wave 2, right, even when we go out to sell, a company like ours, we go out to the store and we were not able to do that, right, because of COVID here. I mean, we were leveraging the power of AI to, send orders to our retailers who were then accepting them. And then, of course, processing that whole, going through the entire chain, supply chain there, powered by AI to deliver that order, not only to the retailer, but even in many cases, getting it to the consumer. I mean, these things would not have been possible, a few years back when we didn't have the power of AI or the power of data that we were collecting. So I think it's going to be a huge enabler. I think it already is in many cases. I mean, you look at many of the platforms that we've been using over the last 12, 18 months that are leveraging AI exponentially right here in our country.
Absolutely. In fact, it's so seamless that you don't realize that it's an AI-powered system. But it also brings into focus the opportunities which are available. And let me come to Dr. Bhattacharya for that. Dr. Bhattacharya, what exciting opportunities do you see AI opening up for the talent of tomorrow as AI evolves to become more entrenched in industries?
All right. So students have always been excited with AI, of course, because of the intellectual angle, because of very exciting possibilities. But what is new now is the presence of data, and which makes it possible to implement things quickly and see their effect. So I'll give you an example. So you go to a place where you cannot read the scripts, you do not understand the language. You take your mobile phone, take a picture of what is written on the shop, let's say, and take the picture, and it automatically gets converted into text by OCR, then gets translated by machine translation technology, and then the text in the target language gets spoken out by text-to-speech system. Okay, so this I gave as an exercise to my natural language processing class, and there were 3 groups who created this system, and they were so excited about the whole business. So the whole point is that embedding AI in very mundane, commonplace things are making it more excitable, more efficient, more scalable. The question of scalability came again and again. So the opportunity that exists for talent, I mean, keeping students motivated is always a big challenge for academicians. Give them challenge, give them exciting things, they're very willing to learn. So now artificial intelligence is making this possible. It is making education an exciting journey. And the students see that whatever they learn has practical application, which can make a difference to their lives and other lives.
Absolutely, and I'm sure there's an element of teamwork also which needs to be taught, because if the real value of AI is going to come with the interplay of folks working within a team, it's not going to be a single source of talent. It's going to be DevOps specialists, it's going to be data scientists, it's going to be data engineers. So it's going to be involving various moving parts working in sync to make sure that the value is created. And in that context, Lorenzo, let me come to you in terms of, say, technology approach and spectrum of opportunity in the data industry. You see the overall maturity is nowhere near complete yet, and that a big gap exists between the high performers and the others. So what happens when AI becomes more industry friendly and less niche?
Let's say, I think, and this is a bit linked to my initial answer. I think we are getting there, right? So there are ways, and no code, less code, that has been mentioned before as well. There are many ways in which there is a partially successful tentative, I would say, to get AI out of the little silo of some data scientist where it was for a while, right? And I think when that happens, the first thing the first positive effect is that people will start to be more ambitious, because if you understand it better, if it's something less far from your everyday life, you start to get more ambitious, asking more ambitious questions, because you know that you will have an answer for it that is not so far. It's not in the head of a data scientist. It's something that you can even try it on your own. And I think that this is where organizations are trying hard to get, because AI done in a box or in a niche silo is never going to generate the growth that the numbers say it should generate, and it will generate. So when we get out of that is when an organization can start to really think, I can become data driven. You move data and AI from an enabler to core business, or from something that is far away to something that is part of your everyday life. And this is where you can start to exploit. There are a number of things that have to happen for that to be possible. It's not just culture. Technology has to support that. Data has to support that. We have a lot of data, but still many times this data is not as consumable or accessible as it should be. We have run a survey a couple of weeks ago in the company to understand how people feel about data and AI. And the feeling is really good. It's really... people is excited, as has been said before. People really engage with the concept, but when you go to, okay, can I do it? Do I have the right access to data? Still, there are a lot of doubt. So we need to. I think the magic happens when you have a trusted data fabric you can access to. And then data moves out into, so the concept of data citizen is very important, and data science citizen is very important. When we all become citizen of the data ecosystem and the data world, that is where the change is going to happen. And I think we are working on that, really to try to integrate and embed more in the business, for example, in BT, than ever before. And he's already giving very, very good results. People talk with AI. People want to engage. People want problem solved. People come with proposals, and they are not technical people. Yeah. So we just need to make sure that they don't get away disappointed.
All right. That's a great point. I think when you become a citizen of the data ecosystem, you think more about the unlimited possibilities rather than having a boxed in approach. And speaking of that massive shift in thinking, Senthil, what are some of the unique qualities that makes Accenture a trusted client partner to deliver scale AI? Because we've been talking about the context and we're seeing this massive shift. So, what are some of the tools or assets or platforms that differentiate Accenture from other players in that context of a massive shift taking place?
Listen, I wanted to make sure that I use this opportunity to say something. We talked about adoption of AI, and I'm really happy for Lorenzo that he got a nice survey from the community there. What touched me was something personal. Because the minute your father or mother call you and ask you to explain what AI is on a 1 hour call, and you get through that unscathed, you're quite okay professionally. So that's what happened to me. So when you started to talk about, what happened to the adoption of AI, for me, it was a personal anecdote that happened. But the second important thing that happened, I think, the past 2 years, and I'm sure my colleagues in the panel will agree with me, is the degree of data philanthropy that has happened in the past 2 years has never been this exponential, Gautam. And imagine we cannot fight a disease like we are fighting right now and the pandemic without the philanthropy happening. I'm talking about geospatial data, medical data, right? The collaboration that have happened across, universities, etc. So I think we live in a very momentous, time, right now with AI. I just wanted to call that out before I went into the Accenture question that you asked. And the Accenture question, I mean, to answer that, it's primarily our ability to understand what scaled AI models truly are, because we're moving away from enterprises using pilots, and proof of concepts into scaled AI. Scaled AI means you move models into production. And once you move models into production, they are in your decision-making systems. And through that, you're making some very critical decisions, being some very risk-taking decisions or commercial decisions or non-commercial decisions. And that's where our focus is. Our focus is on talent who can truly make models production ready, truly can understand the industry nuance that I told you. And the last thing is the culture with which the data is being interpreted. So those are the three things that we really focus on, Gautam.
All right, but how do you contextualize the training of the talent from the perspective of AI for profit and AI for good? How are the opportunities opening up in the context of profit and good?
No, it's a great question. In fact, most enterprises combine this today. It's AI for profit and AI for purpose. And they look at it as profit with purpose too. There are different ways and perspectives in which organizations are doing that. The way we actually approach this is primarily through the lens of the value levers that you unlock. A significant portion of organizations are having sustainability, as you know, as one of the key metric. So it's the dual transformation they go through, technology as well as sustainability. Let me give you an example of sustainability and what we recently did out of our global AI hub here in India and we supported Philippines as well as Australia in the marine reef. 90% of the marine reef is close to, a crisis point right now. We used machine learning technologies, used a lot of data sets that actually we brought inside, worked with the Australian Marine Institute as well in enabling this. Now that was a AI for good and an AI for purpose, project, but then we're now scaling this across other geographies as well.
Understood. And again, as you said, there needs to be a long-term thinking, because immediately there might not be AI for profit, but if you do AI for good, the profits will come. But again, the key challenge still remains, and I'll come to Sanjay and Dr. Agarwal's view on this, which is that in 2016 India produced 2.6 million graduates with STEM skills, and those are the foundational skills to build AI technologies. Now, this new talent pool is the country's biggest asset to drive innovation, but practical proficiency levels and employability of many graduates have remained low, according to recent studies. So I want to ask a question to both Sanjay and Dr. Agarwal as to how this problem can be tackled and more global collaboration can be encouraged in the process. Maybe Sanjay, you could talk about the Millennial Alliance, which you spearheaded, and give us some lessons from that experience.
Sure. No, of course there is a skill shortage, but like I also said earlier, academia, we do look for academia and external partners who can help build this capability, even including, partnering with firms like Accenture to help us leapfrog. Within Mondelez, yes, we do have a Millennial Alliance, and this is like the digital native, talent pool that we have across the enterprise, that we have giving the power, no matter which function they sit in, whether they're in finance, sales, marketing, wherever in the organization they sit, we are giving them the tools. We touched on low code, no code. We're giving them that platform. We're giving them access to data, right? And of course, we make sure before we give them the access, this is data that is very clean, is strongly governed. I mean, those are very, very critical pieces when you kind of set up the citizen community, the Millennial Alliance, and then you just let them go, right? Go let them really unleash the power of those platforms and the data to really make data not only the new oil, but I think data is the new gold if it's clean and it's governed very, very well. So that's what we've been doing, is just unleashing and getting out of the way. Now, yes, not the entire organization is there. There are still people with the mindset, no, this is my data. I need to control it. I need to know what's happening with it. But I think times are definitely changing, and I think we have to accept it, right? And really set up this, whether we call it Millennial Alliance. Now we're moving slowly to calling it the citizen community, and being comfortable that it's okay for anyone and everyone to kind of do this within the organization. Senthil, you touched on scalability, right? This is how we will get scalability. We're not going to get it with 5 or 10 people sitting in one function, kind of driving it in the organization. So that's how at least we are tackling it, or trying to go after it.
All right. It's the freedom which matters. It's build your own AI. That's an interesting approach when it comes to talent development. As you mentioned, you've succeeded in making it into a citizen community initiative rather than just using it in a box, as we had said. That's not the right approach. But if you think about the unlimited possibilities, you never know what you're going to get. Let me get in Dr. Agarwal for her perspective on this issue of, how can more talent development be encouraged in considering the statistics which I just mentioned to you?
Yeah, so like I completely agree with Sanjay on sharing the data, and I could not agree more. Few other points that we can probably look into to improve the number of talent in this particular domain is that at the level of colleges, there should be more curriculum, I feel, because in few colleges, when we have conducted the recruitment drive, then there were people who were from the computer science background, but they were learning machine learning on their own. So there could be more dedicated curriculum in college itself. However, at the level of company, we see that AI is one part, plus the getting the niche is also one part. So like we are in healthcare, most of the talent that we get is ML, and they don't have any inclination towards the healthcare. So I think company training is also something which is very crucial now. And we make sure that for a month in the beginning, we train them on the specific things that we want them to achieve. And we are not judging at the time of the conversation initially in the interview just on the basis of the domain knowledge. It is domain as well as the AI that we are looking into. So it is both getting something from very beginning from the college. The third level where I see this can be improved is at the collaboration level. I think more and more collaboration should happen between the institutes and the corporates as well, which is very limited right now. So maybe conducting a drive where companies can exchange some data set which is not very crucial and which is okay to share, and let people do some trying out hands-on, and then these talents will grow definitely. Actually, I have seen talents have been working really great in our company, even if they did not have a good exposures before. So I think it's a good way when collaboration will happen.
All right. Collaboration helps me segue into the next question, which I have for Dr. Bhattacharya. The first challenge we mentioned was talent development. The next challenge, from the perspective of a research ecosystem, Dr. Bhattacharya, while India has risen in the rankings to number 3, it still has a long way to go before catching up with the United States and China in terms of research papers published, research funding, AI patent applications, and so on and so forth. So, according to you, what's the best framework to encourage collaboration between industry and academia, which can solve this issue? And it is an important issue, which, as you heard Dr. Agarwal speak, can help the industry move forward.
So here, it is very important to look at the fundamentals, okay, the fundamental points. So where do problems originate really? They either originate in nature or they originate in human activities. Technology is a facilitator. Okay, so deep questions which are asked to understand how nature operates is one kind of work. So natural sciences, for example, tackle those kind of questions. And what do human beings do? Why do they act the way they do? Those are the questions from humanities and social sciences. The seed of the problems is from human beings' activities and from nature. Now, to generate, more research impact, to create systems which really are very, very impactful, useful, we have to pick up problems that matter. And one thing that was surprising to me when I went to USA for my higher studies was that professors in MIT, Stanford, CMO, all these top places, they are picking up problems from around them. For example, I remember an OCR system was being developed in sunny Buffalo, which eventually became a very, very commercially successful system also, to read the handwriting on the envelopes. And the US Postal Department had given that project for the problem to be solved. So I then understood that we, as technologists, as professors, as scientists, we have to address the problems which are around us. And from local, we can go to the global concerns. So,
but how do you then address the problem which you earlier mentioned, which is that while your research on AI might be on AI for good, but it will generate profits later. But it's not that easy to convince industry to invest when that's the case, right? So how do you bridge that gap?
Yes, that's a very important question. And here I must mention this very, very long-standing collaboration on R&D with Accenture, which is probably now 10 years old, so at least 8 years old. This is a fact. This is true that industries come to IITs, premier educational institutes, to solve really difficult, complex problems. Okay, and we do not work on problems that can be solved in a day, which should be solved yesterday. No, that kind of urgency is something we really do not cater to. But we really take up difficult, complex problems, and whenever you want to solve a problem which is impactful, you have to really handle the fundamentals and complex issues. Now, convincing the industry about how to convert AI for good to AI for profit, how to fund such efforts. So this, I think, has not been very difficult, at least fortunately for me, and for many of my colleagues in the premier institutes.
What's the secret of your success? How have you managed to do it?
The secret is that we strengthen ourselves, equip ourselves with really fundamental, complex questions. Okay, we are always exercising in the backyard, and our strength is used when the situation arises. Okay.
Understood. And now, Professor Bhattacharya had highlighted, the role Accenture has played with the work that he does. So let me expand on that with Senthil a bit more, considering the need for players like Accenture in this ecosystem. AI-enabled decisions, as we've spoken, have a bearing on people's lives now, raising some big questions also around ethics, trust, legality, and responsibility. So how can companies promote responsible AI? And what does responsible AI mean from a people and skilling standpoint? And Senthil, if you could answer this from the perspective of what we have discussed, how the balance happens, and also how you help, say, the academic field to kind of help talent think things from that perspective.
It's interesting because when Gartner published one of the reports, and it piqued my interest because they said by 2022, 85% of AI projects are going to throw erroneous results because of bias in data algorithms. And here we are talking about scaled AI the past 50 minutes. So they are complete, orthogonals that we're discussing. And your point is so valid because I believe that technology is moving so fast that governance is yet to keep up, Gautam. And there needs to be a momentum that needs to be achieved between AI technology and governance. So that kind of leads me into three things that organizations should do, right? And I'll let you on a little bit of the secret formula at the end as well. The first thing that organizations should probably do is set up the governances around responsible AI, right? In terms of the fairness of the practices and so on. This could be in the form of dissent boards, advisory boards that you have, and so on. So that's the number one call to action for that, right? Number two was to look at responsible AI not as in an event, but as a life cycle, right? You have to go back to grassroots, which means start with where you're sourcing data and then go through the model completely, right? Because we are now starting to be, as a world, move from model centricity into data centricity, which is great, which is the movement that we need to have. But then how do you track it across the life cycle, right? For responsible AI, that's the second thing. And the third thing is build source code and guidelines that can actually help organizations from a responsible AI perspective. And for that, let me give you an example. I'm running a program right now I'm very fortunate to be working with the government of Singapore in terms of this is the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS. in Singapore and recently moved to India, as you know. And when we started this program 2017, 2018, the program was codenamed Veritas. And we are checking on the FEAT principles effectively, which is fairness, ethics, accountability, and transparency and to help financial institutions. I'm talking about banking and insurance companies, to help them with source code and guidelines which can help them drive FEAT principles into AI practices. And that is very, very important to do. I think the secret formula is this, to close my comment there, is that if there is an organization or enterprise which has a very strong inherent risk and compliance function, an R&C function, I've seen them to be traditionally pretty good in applying responsible AI.
All right, let's see how Lorenzo and Sanjay react to that. The question is, how can people first policies and business strategies, which are centered on using responsible AI to augment and extend people's capabilities for the benefit of humankind, be instilled as a culture within government and business ecosystems? Because right now, as you mentioned, Lorenzo, as in culture is still something which we need to grapple with, and it's abstract. So how do we define it in a way that it's easily applicable to everyone?
But yes, and here, I mean, we are doing a lot of work with Accenture actually on trying to get data a bit out of the silo, right, and get it more spread inside the organization. I think for me it's exactly about that. So AI is becoming so ubiquitous and is scaling so fast that you can't responsibly control it or make sure that that is unbiased if you have a central place where everything happens and everything is governed. So you need to get it a bit out of the silo. This is at least when you really want to scale it, right? So I think that first of all, there is work that has to be done in organization to increase the level of literacy. So people need to understand a bit more about the implication, what is it not, and because most of the bias of AI, in my view, is in potential bias in two places. Is not in the AI itself. AI itself, I generally don't like when people call AI itself biased. What is biased is what AI receives in input and the context in which it operates and the outcome. So, and both the input and both the outcome are not made by the team that developed the AI itself, are made in the business or in the organization or in the government that gives the objective or sets the requirement and handles the life cycle. Cynthia mentioned life cycle is immensely important, that word, because we need to make sure that at every step of the life cycle, when we speak about quality, ethics and unbias and lack of bias and absence of bias is part of that quality check. If you do that, and if you make sure that whoever sets an outcome for AI knows what it's saying and knows what the implication of that outcome to be unbiased, then you have responsible AI. So to basically, in summary, apart from the teams that are doing the thing, the way to instill the culture is to increase the level of literacy and make sure that every part of the life cycle of the data and the business outcome have a stake in the game. And this is what we are doing with the Accenture guys in the business, not only on AI, but in all the data management life cycle. It's super important and it's tough.
Absolutely. And the conversation is similar to when we talk about, say, security, right? It's embedded within the native framework. So maybe it's time also to embed all the questions around, ethics and biased outcomes, incorporate it natively within the framework so that you can address it as and when it comes. Sanjay, your thoughts on this?
No, I think Lorenzo summarized it well. Just to add a couple of points. I mean, like I said earlier, I think it has to be top-down sponsored. There has to be an understanding at the top of the organization, and then this kind of flows through the organization. And also the second thing is we have to create a culture of course, doing test and learns is the easy one, but then also accepting failures along the way. I think, so that's the second thing, right? How do you create a culture of actually celebrating failures? Now, you want to make sure you learn from them and, you don't repeat them too often and things like that, but you have to create that culture. And the third one is continuing to create art of possible with your teams, within, with your organization, and even across organizations. I think, gone are the days when you kind of kept everything, closed within your house and said, hey, I can't share, it's top secret. I think today, we touched on citizen community within the organization. I think, now are the days when you can have citizen communities across organizations, because, I think the world is today very, very open. So I think sharing and learning from each other can only, speed up this journey a lot more.
Absolutely. Transparency and collaboration. Those are the key words which matter. And speaking of collaboration, Dr. Agarwal, our last question ended on that note. But here, before we head into the final part of this conversation, talking about AI from the viewpoint of the greater good, what role do you see startups playing in using the power of AI from here on to improve lives, especially in emerging economies such as India?
Yeah, so one is that it is definitely going to give a huge employment to new people, because AI is emerging and it is generating a lot of jobs. We require around, in healthcare specifically, I have seen that in healthcare plus scientific jobs that used to be very less, there has been increase of around 30 to 50% across years. So that is really amazing that we are bringing such new technologies. And what I see is that startup has that margin to take enough risk, which sometimes bigger companies cannot take, or cannot keep a new division to make something happen. So I think a startup can bring those new things quickly and experiment, fail, and then again experiment. So I think that is the keyword, failing fast. And that is what we have done so far, failing fast and then again bringing something new. So that is what I think is the best that startup can do.
All right, failing fast and learning quickly of it, from it to succeed. That's a great viewpoint coming there. And since we have run out of time, I guess it's time to look into the crystal ball, and I'll ask Senthil to do the honors. Considering what all we have discussed, keeping in mind the changing technology and client needs, how does Accenture groom its talent to become the workforce of the future? I believe you're celebrating AI Week as well. So tell us about what's happening and what's going to happen for the talent from here on.
It's just been a fascinating conversation. Let me give you probably 5 different quick points on this. We spend $1 billion on training, our talent. Our talent is everything for us in Accenture. I think the first important thing is we help build rounded AI practitioners. This is just not about great machine learning talent. We want that too, but it's about culture, it's about data, it's about insights, about the applied intelligence part that I talked to you about. So it's really about those skills that are really important. So we focus a lot on that. The second thing is our linkage with universities and institutions, both here, like Professor talked about, and we have a few other professors joining us next week. So we are really fortunate to have them in our ecosystem. We work with MIT, we work with, as well as Alan Turing on responsible AI, the topic that you hit today, Gautam, as well. And we work with, Stanford and Oxford as well. So the university linkages is really important, because I said this is a fast, paced technology, and we've got to be always on the go, if you will. The third important thing is our labs. We focus on deep advanced AI technologies. We love thoughtful experimentation, of these technologies as we take it to our clients like Lorenzo as well as Sanjay. So it's very, very important that we do that. Responsible AI is key. We start right from our first training to talk about, responsible AI as they enter. Diversity is very important. You've probably seen Accenture's investment and commitment on diversity, and we will continue doing that, continuously as well. Like you rightly said, Gautam, it's about celebrating AI, and this week is all about that. This is the AI week, and like all our panelists said, and you've said it really well in your starting point, this is the decade of AI, and you have to be in the place that is helping organizations scale, and that is Accenture. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. This has been a wide-ranging discussion with a lot of the important themes being addressed across AI. And as Senthil mentioned, this is the decade of AI. So let's see where we head next. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists for coming on board and sharing your thoughts, your insights on the topic. And of course, to those viewing in, thank you for tuning in as well. This is Gautam Srinivasan signing off.